Well, good day, everybody. I'm so glad that you tune in each and every week for this podcast of Up and to the Right. And so, whether you are watching this or you are listening, I'm just thrilled that you have taken the time to share with us in this moment. And so, today we have some of our missionaries from the Middle East that are joining us, and that is Terry and Melissa Rhodes. Terry and Melissa, good to have you.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Pastor Rodney.
Well, it is an honor. It is an honor. In fact, we just came out of a weekend of having you at the Oklahoma City location, which actually Guthrie and others got to be able to share in getting to know you a little bit better. And I just want to say thank you. It's always a joy for my wife and I to be able to, sit down and talk to you and hear what God is doing, hear your heart, to hear about the experiences and God's provision. So again, now we get a chance to share this with many others. And so thank you for taking the time.
It's our pleasure. Our pleasure.
So I want to just, first off, give us just a general overview of what where your location is in regards to, I know you can't dive into a specific location, but kind of your role in the Middle East.
So I serve as director of Albeit Ministries, and we work in the Middle East. Albeit Ministries has different types of ministries that we do. For example, my wife does set captives free. I operate some education centers that we call the ILA centers. We have family aid where we distribute out to those that are in need. And then we have a program where we receive teams throughout the year.
Great. Now, I'm going to go back into, we're going to dive into a lot of the specifics of what y'all do, how y'all serve communities and make a difference in the world and bring in the hope of Christ also. We're going to dive into that. And so for you, the audience, we're going to go there. I want to take just a moment, though, to how in the world does a couple like you, which most people don't know this, is that I actually grew up with Terry, a couple of years older than me. So it wasn't like we were buddies hanging out together, but we played high school baseball together and would walk the hallways of Spiral High School together, which that is an awesome thing. Go Bulldogs.
Bulldogs.
But then for you two to go from being, here in the States and then ending up investing your life in First Bethlehem, which is in the West Bank, outside of Jerusalem, and people here, then now to where you are focused on the Middle East there solely. So tell us a little bit about, Terry, you were telling me the other day about how you kind of had this encounter with God. Talk to us about that, and maybe Melissa, you can add to that also.
Yeah, that would be great. So, I grew up in the church. Every Sunday I was at church and everything, but it was in the 7th grade where I really took my faith serious. We were at a church camp, and I remember they brought in a guest speaker, and I felt like that speaker was speaking directly to me. It was just me and him and no one else in the audience. And I knew that was from God. Up until that point, it was really, it was just, a lifestyle or, a cultural thing. But from that moment, God really spoke to me in, using that pastor. And that's when I came to Christ. And I walked firmly with God for a period of time. But when I got into high school, I started hanging out with a group of guys, and those guys were great guys. And sometimes I still hang out with those guys. And today they're walking with Christ. But at the time, none of us were walking the way we should have. And I ended up getting into a relationship that I probably should not have been in. And over time, we separated, and there was a lot of questions of, was it me? Was it her? Was it, what about if I'd have done this, or what if I'd have done that? What if she'd have done this? A bunch of what if questions. And I wasn't living the way I should live. And the reality is it was all about me. I was living for me. A lot of people, if they saw me, they would think, oh, he's a good guy. But the reality was, I wasn't following Christ. And so, therefore, I wasn't worthy. A little bit later on, I got to meet my lovely wife, and I started dating her. And one day we were out for a drive, and I was just sitting there praying, and God just verbally spoke to me. He said, if you do not start living for me, the same thing is going to happen with this relationship. And I really liked this girl. I really liked her. And so I remember pulling the car over on the side of the road and just saying, hey, Melissa, I really need to talk to you. God just spoke to me, and he's telling me that I need to get in church. I need to change my life. And so if you want to continue with this relationship, we're going to have to do this together. You're going to have to start going to church with me and get our lives right. And she was like, yes, I would love that.
And so, Melissa, tell us about you. You got your faith journey in regards to all the way up kind of leading to Terry. And then all of a sudden that moment had to have been obviously it's a big moment the way he shared that.
Right.
And just give your perspective.
Right. So I had grown up with lovely Christian parents that had Bible study in the home, were always teaching biblical principles. What a blessing in my life my parents have been. And I had a tender relationship with the Lord from a very young age, maybe even 4 years old. I remember just taking walks and talking with the Lord. And I didn't have any kind of theological training at 4, but I knew that the Holy Spirit was speaking to me, and I knew that he was my creator and he loved me. And as I would attend Bible studies that my father would do, I would listen to him teach, and I would learn from him. And it was amazing. And I walked with the Lord for a long time. And when I became a teenager, similarly, I went through some times of rebellion and walked away from my faith and walked away from the Lord. And when Terry and I met and were dating, and I knew things needed to get right. And when he said that, I had been praying for that and hoping for that and knowing that that was true. So the Lord was working on both of us. And Terry was the one who took the lead on that. So
Good. So then you both dove into the local church and kind of began to serve, begin to grow in your faith, begin to grow. And then you talked to me about a class that you took. And so kind of talk to us about kind of that journey of, and then how that just opened your eyes spiritually to a whole nother thing that God was asking of you.
Yeah, so we were very active in the church. We were doing outreach to international students. We were hosting classes in our home. We were doing small groups. We were leading youth groups for our children. Man, everything was great. And we felt like we were doing what we really needed to be doing. And then in 2006, the missions pastor came to us and said, hey, I would really like for you to take this class. Okay, can you tell me a little bit about it? He says, well, I'll tell you what. He goes, the first class is free. Just go to it. And if it's something that you like, just stick with it. If it's not, you don't have to go to it. And so he didn't really give us background information, but we both went to it. And it was held at John Brown University. And so we drove over to Siloam Springs and took this class called Perspectives. And the first class is on the history of missions. And it really delves into the heart of God and his desire for all people to be reached.
I mean, that might seem like something that's a no-brainer, maybe something simple, but what you find out is, God chose a people and he chose those people for himself, but he chose them to be his representatives, to be his image, to be the light to the nations around him, because he wanted all people to know him. And yeah, that's true. But when you start thinking of it like that, it kind of rearranged our thinking.
It did.
Yeah.
And so we started transitioning our life. We started taking trips abroad, looking for places to go. And one of those places was Israel. And we got there and we didn't really like it a lot. And we decided that we would spend a day in Bethlehem, and then we'd go back to Northwest Arkansas.
At the time, we had like open tickets because we both worked for airlines, and so we were able to kind of adjust our airlines and our tickets with our kids, and so it was like an option for us to just kind of pop in and pop out. Not everybody gets that opportunity.
So we traveled to Bethlehem and stayed at a place called Bethlehem Bible College. And we ended up spending 11 days in that place and just spent time praying and hanging out with the people. And God really spoke to us that this is going to be your new home. And so we went back to the States, started preparing for that. You know, we had a lot of things that we needed to do before we went out into the field.
Yeah, so I would say we had children in soccer games. We had children taking karate. We had, just a typical kind of life here. And it was great. We loved it. But it did take a little while to kind of get moved.
Yeah, it took us about 2 years to get things in order. And then we went to Bethlehem, and we were there for 8 years. It was wonderful.
And I've been to Bethlehem. I have been on the streets there. Actually, I've been a part of a full out, on whatever it's kind of like almost like a shootout with mainly rubber bullets and stuff. But there's some handmade, little grenades and different things that are used. And I've actually, so I know the danger zone that you were in. A lot of times when people think of Bethlehem, you just throw that word out there. You think of the peaceful, beautiful place that Jesus was born, and how wonderful and nice it is to be there. And, I wish I could go live there too. And Bethlehem is not that way in regards to this peaceful little place. It is filled with violence, filled with a constant tension between the Jews and the Palestinians, and give people an understanding of what you were living in every day.
Yeah, so I think I'll just answer with a really quick story. So the first year we were there, we had some of our children with us. And so they're in the school system, the school that we're teaching at. So we get to see them every day, but you still have times when you're maybe at a teacher's meeting and the children are going to go home for a little bit. They were a little bit older, so they could walk home by themselves, things like that. And we lived close by the school where we were working. And then I had one of the teachers came up to me and said, "You need to make sure you're watching out for your children this week." And I said, "Well, what's the situation?" And she said, "Well, they're people that are doing organ harvesting, and they're picking up kids off the street, especially ones with blue eyes." And I have children with blue eyes, and so I'm like, okay. And then she went on to tell some really horror stories about several children who had died through organ harvesting recently in the area. And then after that, there were soldiers that were coming in, kind of like what you had seen. That was our first year there. So there were a lot of riots and a lot of soldiers coming by, and we'd have people say, "Hey, make sure your lights are off tonight. You don't want any of the soldiers to be coming by your area. Turn off all the lights." And I mean, it was like one horror after another. And so I was quite terrified. And then I was wondering, how do I hold on to my children like this? How do I keep them safe? What does this mean for us as a family? And I became really terrified. And then I had to spend some time with the Lord. And he had to say, "Hey, I've put you here. And I was thinking, well, do I just live here in fear and I can't get out on the streets and my children can't participate in anything? Or I mean, is this what the Lord's brought us for? No way. No way. And so, through prayer and a lot of struggling with the Lord and obedience, it was difficult that first year. You're right. It sounds like a great place to be, but it can be pretty scary. And it is a great place to be in the end. We have a lot of friends that we love there.
Yes. And we stay in contact with them almost on a weekly basis.
So you spent several years there, you mentioned, and then there was the transition. Talk to us about where you are now in the Middle East, or at least kind of a general idea of where you are. And we may leave out certain names and places and stuff for some reasons of protection and of everybody involved. But could you give us a little feel of your move from Bethlehem to where you presently are, and kind of what that looks like now?
Yeah. So in 2011, civil war broke out in Syria. The result of that was a lot of people moved out of Syria into different countries in the Middle East, and they became refugees in these countries. And we had a pastor that was out of Jerusalem that was going into these countries and visiting with the refugees and sharing with them and helping them with food. And he invited me to go along with him. And so I started going into these countries with him, and we would start having competitions of who could smuggle in the most Bibles. And it was a great time, and we saw a lot of people come to Christ through these home visitations that we would do inside the refugee camps. And that's what really gave me a heart for wanting to go into these Muslim countries.
Wow. So you end up making the move. Okay, here you are now, and talk to us a little bit about what that journey was like. Because now you got a whole nother, you went from trying to adjust to Bethlehem and life there. Now you are in a whole nother environment where the Muslim population is about 99%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so tell us about how that transition and what that was like, and just give us some insight of the challenges that you had to face, just even as a family, as a couple, and dealing with everyday life events.
Right. As you said, it is a 99% Muslim population, but there are a few churches allowed where we're at. And so the first thing we did was look for Christian community. And I think that's really important for anybody that's working on the field, or anybody that's in the States. We need to live in community. And so we began to, like he said, he had been working with a pastor. And so we were able to find some communities that were Christian communities where we live. And we were interacting with them. And that's what really helped us learn how to best share our faith, how to work in that context, was just through leadership, pastors, and people that we were with there that were believers. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So as Melissa mentioned, we basically went to the country that we went to based on Christian community. And we saw God working through a particular church. And so we decided that's what we want to do, is we want to work with this church. Mm-hmm. And we go there and we realize that there's some boundaries or barriers that were in our way to start working. One of those is we didn't know culture. We didn't know language. We didn't really know anything. And so what we had to do in that first year was really dive into language. We had to dive into learning culture and finding out what is appropriate.
And how to do ministry in that context. Yeah.
Even how we share our faith. Right. And so I would say if somebody is interested in going out, one of the things that they need to do is, learn the culture that they're going into, because it's not something that you could just
It's not
start the next
natural.
day.
Yeah, it's not a natural to know how to share with people of a different faith, and then you don't know the culture and the context. So really, a lot you need to be humble and willing to learn. So the Lord humbled us, especially with the language.
So tell us about the language. What is the language that you had to learn and that you are still learning? As we discussed over the weekend, like you've been doing this for several years, but you still haven't mastered it.
Yeah.
It's one of the most difficult languages on the face of the planet. I know that for a fact from listening to other people, not from me personally learning it, but from hearing people discuss this. Talk to us about some of the challenges of that language.
Yeah, well, I don't think Terry and I are very special when it comes to language learning. We don't have any special abilities, but when the Lord puts something on your heart, you just, you continue. And so it is Arabic, and Arabic is a difficult language. And I feel like we can share what we want to and how we need what we need to, but it is one of those languages that's lifelong learning. So yeah, we'll continue in that.
What I like about the Arabic language is that um, there's many words that have God's name in the Arabic word, and when you're sitting there listening to the people talk, what you hear is God is on their lips constantly, and that's one aspect that I really respect in the Arab culture.
So in the setting that you're in, I know one of the things that you have you stumbled on initially, and then now you have dove into full board is issues of human trafficking.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about what you have seen and what you have witnessed there.
Yeah, I would say that the Middle East, all of the Middle East has this problem. It's something that is built into Islam, actually, because they have their own set of legal system, their own laws. And underneath that, they allow for other things. And one of those things is de facto slavery. So they have something called the kafala system. And the kafala system means sponsorships and system. And so that means that people, they'll have send agents out that connect with people in different nations, a lot of times poor Christian nations. And those agents will seek out agents on that side. And it's a whole system of working where these people are exploiting and lying to women in those countries to get them to come over and work in the Middle East. And they'll sign contracts, but the ladies won't know what the contracts say. They'll be written in Arabic. They will be told many lies, and then they will end up being abused, not paid, and none of it happens as they are expecting. They're expecting they can work, make a good wage, send it back, and help their family, and that doesn't happen. I mean, I won't say it never happens, but it is a system that is protective of the abusers, not the people that are being abused. So it's just the way the legal system is set up. Yeah, it's slavery.
And one of the key things that you've mentioned is that when they get to the airport and once they get through, they take their passport from them. And so
Right.
literally their identification, and some of these ladies are showing up in countries that they don't even know where they really are.
Right.
And so now they have no passport. They are basically held captive to individuals that are in many cases abusing them.
Yes.
And at best, even if they're not physically abusing them, they are locking them into environments where we're working 7 days a week and controlled all the time.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, we're finding situations right now where women are being drugged. They don't know what's happened to them. They wake up and then they're in this situation. I have a lot of ladies in Syria. They didn't even know they were in Syria. The work that I'm doing is in 3 different countries right now in the Middle East, but it's across the entire Middle East. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you get involved with this? And then what has kind of transpired over time in regards to progressive, because you went in little and now you are deep into it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So it all started when I started to attend that church we talked about at the beginning. There was a Kenyan lady that was attending the church, and one of the pastors said, "Hey, this woman could really use some encouragement. She's doing some great work, but she's doing it alone." And then she came up to me, and he connected us. And so the people there, the ladies there, would call her Mother Mary. And Mary was an older woman that had, at the time, I didn't know her history, but she was just inviting me in to her work. She was inviting me in to go to the prison and visit the women and encourage them, and then be able to help them get out of prison and back home. And so I would go along with her, and she would be going to the police stations to find out why that woman was in prison, what happened to her. She would be going to the prison to visit, and she just really showed me the ropes. And I realized it was a really big work. I mean, there were hundreds of women that were behind bars for no reason, but they had run away from slavery and now were stuck in a prison somewhere they didn't know how to get out, with no family and no one to visit them. Yeah. And so I just started doing that with Mary, and we became really good friends. And eventually she was able to go back to her home country. So she left me with the work, and I did that as faithful as I could until I was just exhausted. And I was like, Lord, I can't continue. Like, this is crazy. And I was talking to a friend about that, and she said, well, let's see if we can gather the church. And so we started to do an all call for anybody that was in our region. You know, hey, this is an issue. Would you come to the prison with us? Hey, this is an issue. Can you come help? And so little by little, God started sending volunteers. I have about 25 volunteers now that work with me.
Wow.
We get about 100 women a year from the prison system and back home and out of slavery. It's a lot of work, and it's amazing.
Just think about that for just a moment, audience listening right now. About 100 women a year. And this is not an easy process. You're going against a systematic system of slavery that is so ingrained in the culture and requires much perseverance, favor, and then it requires money to be able to handle securing flights if they do get out, and transportation to the airport that's under guard. Give us a feel of what all this is like to be able to get somebody out of prison and get them back to their home.
Yeah, so basically I will get to know the women through usually a phone call. They'll call me from the prison. They get certain days they're allowed to call, and everybody has my phone number in the prison. In fact, I was told it's written in big letters, in big numbers on one of the walls. Call for help, Mama Melissa. So those women will use their phone call to call me. And I'll sit there a couple days a week, just answer the phone. And I write their information down. Okay, what is your name? How do you spell your name? What country are you from? Tell me a little bit about your situation. So they'll get me that basic information. I'll type that up, and I'll put that out in a WhatsApp message to the volunteers. Okay, who would like to go visit prison? And that's when we start doing that first touch with them. We'll start interacting with them just as a prison visit. And it's on, like a phone with the wall with the glass. You just want to encourage that woman. So it begins as just a basic prison ministry where you're just trying to encourage the women. We see you. We know you're here. It may take a while, but we're going to try to figure this thing out and how to get you back home. And so we do that, and then a lot of them will need legal help. And so we employ a full-time lawyer, and he's an advocate for the women, and we'll go meetings with him and go through the cases of what's happening. This person was accused of theft. This person was accused of just different things, and all of them will have a runaway case, because if they've run away from their sponsorship home, they've got a case on them. So those cases are pretty easy, but sometimes the abuser will put more cases on top of the women to try to abrogate any responsibility for them. So they don't want to have to see them again, so they'll just say, oh, they stole from me. And so it's an easy way to get rid of any responsibility.
Okay, let's stop there for just a moment so that people can understand what's going on here, because you said they got a record, like a theft or whatever. But we
Yeah.
got to understand these are individuals that they don't know the language. They're
Mm-mm.
coming across continents to get there to work. They think they're going to get work, get paid. Their passport is taken from them. They are
Mm-hmm.
locked into a house where they can't get
Mm-hmm.
out. They're there 7 days a week, and then they finally get so fed up. If they can find a way, they break free. They go on a run. Then because
Mm-hmm.
they're running away from slavery, they
Mm-hmm.
get arrested, and
Right.
then whoever it is that is the slave owner basically is just telling the police, "Oh, here's what she did.
Right.
And it's just made up stuff
Right.
to validate their."
Yeah.
And again, that I want people to understand, this is a whole crazy system that
Mm-hmm.
we can't comprehend. We and but it's crucial to understand what these ladies are up against and how it's literally impossible for them to be able to break free and to be able to get out of
Right.
this without some advocate from the outside.
That's right.
So I want to inject something. One of the reasons that they call Melissa is because they do not have any representation in the country that we're in. There is embassies located in a bordering country, but there's no embassy or consulate or anything like that to represent them. And so they have no one to come visit them in the prison. They have no one to advocate for them legally. And so that's what Set Captives Free does.
Right. Yeah, so then we will begin to work on them case by case. And at any time we'll have 80 to 100 women we're working on. And it doesn't just include their cases, it also includes interacting with their home country, like because they'll give me phone numbers of their mother or phone numbers of their brother or phone numbers of a sister. And so I will WhatsApp those family members and say, hey, this is where this young woman is. And they'll, a lot of times they won't have heard from them a while. A lot of them maybe think they're dead, they're missing. So, I have all these conversations, and I let them know because if they can, it's great for them to be able to buy those plane tickets because it costs a lot of money for each lady to get home. So I'll start saying, hey, if you're able to talk with all your family members and see if you guys can raise enough money because this woman is going to need a flight home once she's out of the legal system. And so, we do a lot of communication, and then after they've gone through that court system, maybe they have to have 3-4 appearances. So they'll be in prison for a while. But once they've finally been exonerated and they get that not guilty sentence, then we start to work with, okay, they're going to be sent into a detention center. They're going to be released from the prison, put into detention for a deportation. And so that's when the deportation papers start coming through. We make sure the travel documents are in place. If we have to, we'll contact the embassies to try to get the travel documents if we can't get the passports because they've been thrown away or whatever happened to them, weren't returned. And so then, it's a process to get each woman out. Yeah, that's what I would say. And we help hundreds, but for as far as buying tickets, we'll buy maybe 100 a year, which is a lot. It's a lot to raise money for those tickets, for the lawyer, for the fees. Legal fees for everything.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my mind around, if this is what you're dealing with in this country, and I know this country, what about all of the Middle East? What about the
Oh my
Islamic
goodness.
world? That just literally the sheer numbers of women that are held in slavery.
Yeah, and I mean,
It
some of
just
them don't live. I mean, they're killed. I've talked with ladies whose sisters went to other countries, and they were in contact with them, and they were just slaughtered in those homes. So it's dangerous. Like, I mean, they're abused sexually, they're abused in every way, and some of them don't make it out. So
okay.
I mean, we send dead bodies home. So it's a serious work.
Now just think about what they just said. We send dead bodies home, and I want you to just kind of talk a little bit about Islam in regards to the honor killings and what you see, what you hear that is out there. And I don't know what all you're free to be able to talk about right now, but just to give us a feel of what that looks like.
Well, I can give you an example of some people that attend one of our centers in the north. We had a young lady who was attending our center for education purposes, and her husband basically did not want to be married to her any longer. And so he went to his wife's brother and said, I think she's sleeping around with another man. Even though he knew that she was not sleeping around with another man, he went to the brother because he knew that that would bring shame on the family by simply saying those words. And so to keep the honor of the family name, the brother went to the man's house and killed his sister so that honor would stay on the name of the family.
And I would say this is something that happens regularly. It's not talked a lot about, maybe in the news. Maybe you haven't heard a lot about that, but in the Middle East, it is a common practice. And women, it's so important. Every kind of aspect of life for a woman, they're not equal, and they face child marriage. They don't have choice in who they marry. They don't have choice about how they dress. They don't have choice about anything, and everyone has to be very careful because the end can be being slaughtered for nothing. Yeah.
And also some things that we take for granted, education. These young ladies, for the most part, aren't getting the education that young men are. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. That's
Right.
discouraged. Education is discouraged, and in fact, usually not allowed after about 13 or 14 in some of the more rural areas.
As a matter of fact, one of our focuses, once again, for the Education Center in the north is to educate the girls.
Yeah.
Because what we found is that if we can keep them in the center and having them go through classes like Arabic and math and life skills and classes like that, then it's less likely that their father will sell them off to another man. And these are girls that are 12, 13, 14 years old.
So let's just kind of talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned Syria, and what's going on there now. And I know that there's one family that I had the privilege of being able to meet that were refugees from Syria back a few years ago when I was with you. And for the audience listening right now, I have been there. I have been on the ground, walked the streets with you guys. I've driven around the country, specifically where you're located and outside and around. But and then just one of the families that refugees there, and they're coming to Christ, their growth, now going back into Syria. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So let's focus on that family that you were talking about. That family came to Christ through home visits. One of the things that we do is we really get to know our students, and then we go in and visit them in their homes, and we share our faith with them. And this family came to Christ through home visits and then was discipled for many years. Now, this family is unique in the fact that they really want to share with everyone else, and even though it's a danger to them, they even encourage their children to share, in the schools and things like that. The result of that has been beatings of their children, and even the older son, he's been put in the hospital a couple of times as a result of him sharing his faith.
Okay, Terry, just right now, I just want to pause for a second and think about what you just said. You just said that a young man whose family had come from a Muslim background, who have grown in their faith with Christ, and for sharing his faith is beat up to the point that he had to be hospitalized on a couple of occasions. To me, just thinking about that, we got people that listen to me right now, and even myself, that like my stance for Christ is like, am I going to choose to turn off that and not watch that on TV? But theirs is like, I shared my faith with somebody, and sharing my faith with somebody means that I'm going to get beat up and end up in the hospital. Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct. And what's amazing is what I love about when Arabs come to Christ, they really count the cost. They really understand that this may mean that I may not get married. This means that I will probably lose my job and I will live in poverty for the rest of my life. This means that I will be rejected from my family. And so they really do a great job of counting the cost before they accept Christ. And so when they do come to Christ, man, they're on fire. They're like Paul.
So this family that you're talking about, this young boy and his parents, have now went back into Syria. What's going on there? And kind of give us an idea of what's happening.
So the mother has worked with us in our center for the last 3 years, and we've worked real close together. She recruits the teachers, she recruits the students that come in, and does a great job of mentoring the teachers while we get the opportunity to go into the homes of the students and share. Now they're in the process of returning to Syria. And so they've been given the vision, or God has given them the vision that Syria is going to be given to them. And so we want to be a part of that. We want to help this family as they return to be able to be established, open an education center, and to be able to function in Syria. And so we want to help support them in that.
Now, give us a feel of when you say these centers, these educational centers. I think we've touched on it a little bit, but give us a better feel of what, when people come to this educational center, what you are doing to be able to help impact their lives and even the communities.
So the name of the centers are the Aila centers, which in Arabic means family. And so the idea is to see the whole family come in and to transform the communities through getting to know the families. And we offer all kinds of educational classes, enrichment classes.
So the educational classes, we focus on children. We teach them because they're not able to go to school legally. So we try
because they're refugee, right? Yeah.
That is correct. And so we try to keep them caught up at grade level. And so we teach them basics like Arabic and math and classes like that. We also offer enrichment classes, which is for everyone, where they can come in and learn to play the guitar or piano or something like that. And then we offer occupational classes for adults, where the men can come in, they can learn how to run electricity, they can learn how to fix air conditioners or refrigerators, they can learn how to run closed circuit television, they can learn how to cut hair, become a barber, things like that. For the women, we teach sewing, baking, classes like that, where they can earn a living from their home because they're not allowed to go out and earn a living.
Yeah. So you got these classes going, and you're developing relationships. You got some type of foundation of trust that's going on. Then how do we talked about the very beginning, culture. We talked about the language barriers. Now you know Arabic. You might not feel like you're the most proficient at it, but you can actually communicate now. And then you're going in and you're introducing Christ. You're bringing the hope, the living waters that the woman at the well experienced in Samaria in John chapter 4. So talk to us about that. What does that look like? And how do you open that door? Because you've got to be also very wise too. Think about what Jesus said when he says, as wise as serpent, as harmless as doves. And that's where you live every day, because you know that at the wrong time in the wrong place, it could be the end of ministry there. And for you guys, so you got to hear from God. You got to know when and who is ready for the gospel.
Right.
Yeah. So I can give you two examples. One is in the center itself. I had a young man that he was not with his family. And when he got off from work, he would come directly to the center. So he would show up at the center around 5 in the afternoon, but his class wasn't till 7 o'clock. And I would be back in the office trying to get some paperwork done, and he would come in and he would want to talk. And so I would sit and talk with him. And through that, I would share my faith with him. But he was the type of guy that was what I considered disruptive. He would, during class, when it would be called to prayer, he would shame all the men that didn't go over to the mosque next door to go pray. And so every day I would sit and talk with him and share my life, and he would share his life. But, I felt like, this guy, he's causing trouble because he's disrupting all of our classes. And then one day he just came up to me and he says, you guys are different. I want to know more about what you believe. And I happened to have a Sudanese guy. This guy was Sudanese. And I had a Sudanese pastor standing right beside me. And I connected them. And he shared with him. And he came to Christ. And then this guy turns around and shares it with two other guys that come to Christ. And so we had 3 come to Christ in 1 week as a result of just
The centers.
the center itself. The other way is typically, the typical way is that we get to know the students. Once we get to know them, we start visiting them in their homes. And one of the things that we do is we go through a series of stories that we share with them. And these stories are stories that they can relate to. It's about the prophets. And they don't have a problem with these stories about the prophets. But what we do is we show how these prophets point to a Messiah. And then after we go through that series of prophets, then we start talking about the Messiah himself and how this Messiah is God. And we give examples through the stories in the Bible of how this Messiah is not a prophet. He is God himself. And then eventually we share this, the gospel with them after we've gone through that set of stories. And we train our teachers on how to do that as well. And so we're not, it's not just Melissa and I, it's the teachers that also are going out and sharing with these students.
And we have other resources that we use too. There's a lot out there actually for interacting, engaging in Islam or talking with Muslims and sharing faith. I think one of the biggest things is just showing love. I mean, it's just like your neighbors here. You care for them. You show that you love them. You engage in conversation. You ask about their day and how they're doing and what's going on in their life. And it's kind of like what that guy said at the center is like, there's something different about you. Like, why don't you tell us about what you believe?
Yeah, and that's something that, when we were at North Church this weekend, we saw that. Yeah. We see you do that on a regular basis. We see Pastor Clint doing that. Pastor Sampson intentionally going up to people and sharing with them and talking to them and just engaging them where they are. It's just a beautiful thing.
It is wonderful to hear what God is doing. And I just want to, first off, just celebrate your obedience to Christ. And there's many others, though, that are joining you because you have a team that you work with closely. And then there's an extended team that just all throughout that area that you're connected with. Give us a feel of what God is doing in the areas where you're at right now. And of course, this is just a small area, but God's on the move. Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. And so it's just wonderful to see when I've been there that I got to see, I tell the story quite often, but of the Chinese guy who knows not a bit of English, who learned Arabic had a call of God to leave China to go to Syria right there to be able to open a Chinese restaurant, making nothing, probably depending on support from back home completely,
Yes,
to be the cover for really an underground church.
that's right.
And I remember when I was praying about whether we should be there, and I walked up to this guy, and I just think about, what should we invest? Should we be this? Is this the place? I wanted to be there and see firsthand what God is doing there. And I walked up, and he's wearing a pair of Oklahoma Sooner sweatpants, and I'm like, what? I'm praying for a sign, and there's a sign. Of course, I walked to him. I said, I'm asking him, does he know what he's wearing? And through translation, he makes it clear that he has no clue what he's wearing. He has no idea that these are Oklahoma Sooners. And I told him, I said, well, if you knew, you would not be wearing those. You'd be wearing Oklahoma State. I joke with him about that. But of course, it was so funny. But to me, it was like, God, signs and wonders still happen today. And that was a sign and wonder for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And then to see people from South America, people from different parts of the world, Mexico and some
Asia,
of the Caribbean,
Europe,
yes,
Africa, all over. Yes.
there is missionaries.
Yeah,
I
God's
was so
sending
encouraged.
people out.
Yeah,
So y'all, come on.
come on.
So I
So
would say that, yeah, I mean, I was thinking right offhand. I mean, Terry will jump in, I'm sure. But we know people that are doing work in media, and they share, using media platforms in different ways where people in Islamic countries can have opportunities to hear. Otherwise, they wouldn't. And there are people doing work in the business marketplace. There are people that do work. I mean, we're connected to hundreds of workers where we're at. And it is a blessing and an honor to see the way God's working, and he loves the people and how he calls them in. And he uses us. I mean, all of us.
Yeah. I would say that, in the centers, we have, Melissa and I are the directors of it. And then we have managers that run the day-to-day business. And then we have the volunteers that come in on a regular basis. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. But, as you mentioned at the beginning that you grew up with me, you know me. There's nothing special about me. It's simply the Holy Spirit is using me in those situations that I get to see these signs and miracles. And when you're a refugee, you're at the lowest end of the spectrum on poverty, and so you cannot afford antibiotics. You can't afford medicine. You struggle to have enough food to eat. We were in I was in a house on a home visit, and there was a man that had lost his legs as a result of
Infection.
an infection because he couldn't afford the medicine. And then when I went to visit him, it was the day that he got out of the hospital, and he couldn't afford painkillers.
And both of his legs were cut off from the knee. So now he's amputated. Two legs. 40-year-old man. Big, strong guy.
And we go in to share with him, and we were noticing that he's in so much pain that his body is just literally shaking and shaking. And the people that I'm with said, he can't hear anything. He's in so much pain. We just need to leave. And
if you know Terry, that is something God's gifted him with, is a real stubborn spirit. He's gonna go, and he's gonna share.
I believe that God had us there for a reason. And so we're sitting there, and we ask him, would he, how can we help him, basically? And he says, I'm in pain. I'm in a lot of pain. He says, I need you to pray for me. And so I told him that I told him the story of Bartimaeus and how Bartimaeus was a blind man sitting at a city gate, and Jesus walks by and he cries out to Jesus, "Son of David, save me."
Have mercy.
And when Jesus calls him to him, he tells him from the heart what he wants. He says, "Master, I want to see." And Jesus tells him that it's his faith that allows him to see. And it says that Bartimaeus instantly followed him. And I share this story with this man, and I tell him that, this man cried out from his heart. And so that's what I would like for this guy to do is to cry out. And he's from a Muslim background. He's never done anything like this. And he keeps telling me, I want you to pray for me. I want you to pray for me. I said, that's not my responsibility. It's your responsibility to cry out, because he is the one true God. And he began to pray. And he cried out. And it was beautiful. I mean, you should have seen him. And what was amazing is as he finished the prayer, he takes the cloth that he was biting on because he was in so much pain, and he folds it up. And the man, what's remaining of his legs, he folds them underneath him, and he just has this peace about him. And he begins to talk to us. And he says that Jesus just healed me.
You had no pain.
And so if you do not believe that in miracles, the same Jesus that did all those miracles in the Bible, he's alive and he's doing those same miracles today.
Yeah.
Today that man, you should see him. His faith is so strong.
Yeah, he said, Terry said to him, he says, "Do you think we just took that pain away from you?" And he just started laughing. He said, "No, that was Jesus."
So beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, and let's talk about that a little bit more, because there are Muslims that are having dreams and visions.
Oh yeah.
There are people that God has just given them. He is preparing the ground for the word of God.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people out there that are totally behind a veil, a curtain of darkness, but yet the light of Christ is penetrating, and many times that's just through dreams and visions that people are having. Are you hearing this too from individuals?
I'll share a story. There was a man that we know. He would come to our house for Bible study. But when we met him, we said, "So how did you end up, coming for Bible study?" He said, "Well, I had a dream, and in that dream, there's this man in white, and he was calling. He was saying, 'Follow me.'" And he had never been to a church. In fact, he was a very strict Muslim, and so he was concerned about the dream. So he went and asked the leader, the sheikh, the leader of the mosque, "Hey, I had this dream. What should I do with it?" And the sheikh told him, "Oh, no, don't worry. That happens sometimes. Just ignore it," and dismisses him. So he goes back home that night, and Jesus appears again. Same thing. A white man, and says, "Follow me." And he can't get this vision out of his mind, and he's trying to ignore it like the sheikh says, but he just can't. The third night, he has the dream again, 3 nights in a row. And so finally he says, "All right, I have to go. I've got to seek out a Christian." But this was in an area that didn't have any churches, and there were no Christians. And so he has to go out several villages over until he finally finds where there's a church. And he gets to that church, and he knocks on the door, and the priest answers. And he tells the priest, "Hey, I've had this dream, this vision of this man in white, and he's saying to follow me." And the priest says, "Nope, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to have anything to do with this. But my brother, he's an evangelical, and he might answer your questions. So you can go talk to him and tells him where to go." And so that's how Jamil came to know the Lord. He went and talked to this brother that shared the truth of Jesus, and over a period of time they studied the Bible, and he accepted Christ. And We hear stories like that a lot, actually. So,
constantly.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that we will ask people when we go into their home.
Yeah.
Have you had a dream of a man and wife?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how often they have.
That is amazing to consider. Terry and Melissa, we're going to go ahead and wrap up, but I want you to, if you don't mind, just pray for our audience that we will each be proactive in our sharing of our faith and bringing hope to people and being light in darkness, because whether they are wherever people are working, even their apartments, their neighborhoods, there is a growing sense of darkness in our country. There's more and more people that are disconnected from faith and church and that need to hear the good news of Jesus. And just take just a moment to encourage our audience to be able to be light in darkness and then pray over them. I would greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, I would say that there's, like Terry said, there's nothing special about us. We just said yes to Jesus. And so it's just a matter of obedience, stepping step by step and sharing with your neighbors and talking and being faithful and being a light. That's what we're called to be, as a light. And so you want to be that light, and you do that by speaking. You have to speak it. So it's good to let your life show and reflect Christ, but it's even better to explain to people why you're living in an opposition to maybe the culture around you. And so I think it's so important for us to tell, and even the way Terry will, we do training on sharing your faith, and the main thing we do is just put the word of God in our heart and just share stories of Jesus. And so I would encourage, people to just start being bold about knowing Bible stories and talking about what Jesus did and letting people become curious about that.
And I would say that, I would agree with Melissa. There's nothing special about us, but there is something special about the God that we serve. He gives us his Holy Spirit. And promise after promise after promise is that he will be with us. He never leaves us. He never forsakes us. He is with us always. And so it's not about us. In John 14, he tells us, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. That is the greatest form of worship, is to be obedient. And so for each one of us, what we need to do is we need to know the will of God. For some of us, it's to go. For others, it's to sin. Others, to mobilize. And for some of us, it's to receive. And so we need to know our part and be obedient in that.
So good. Would you mind wrapping us up in prayer, Terry, and just praying over our audience that God will just awaken their hearts to their responsibility to go into all the world, and that go into all the world is to their neighbor. It's at the grocery store. It's at the workplace. And just wrap us up in prayer with that.
Yes, I'd love to. Father, you are a loving God. You desire, you're a good Father. You desire what's best for us. And yet, Father, as children, we're not always obedient. And yet, Father, you still love us. You still care for us. You still watch over us and protect us. And you promise us that you are with us always. Father, I pray for each person that's listening today. Father, I pray that there would be the faith there, just like Bartimaeus. Father, that they would cry out to you, that they would desire your heart, your will, and that it would be done, both here on earth as it is in heaven. Father, I pray that they would seek, in doing so, Father, that if they are meant to go, Father, that they would be obedient to that. That they would be, yes, Lord, I am here. And they would go Father, if it's to sin, Father, I pray that they would be obedient with their money, that they would provide for those that are going. And Father, I pray that if it's to mobilize, that they would be obedient to speak out to those that and encourage those that need to go. And Father, if it's to receive, that they would receive with a happy heart, that they would be joyful in receiving those that are coming back. And Father, I know that for all of us, you desire us to go, whether it's to our neighbor or to work or to school, or whether it's to go across the ocean, Father. You've called all of us to go, to be prepared with your word, to be on our lips. Father, I just pray for faithfulness in that and obedience. Father, I pray that that your Holy Spirit would just nudge them and they would say, yes, Lord, to sharing. Father, in doing so, that your church would just bring you honor and glory. In the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Melissa and Terry, thank you so very much for joining us today.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It was great to see you.
Well, if you want to know more information to be able to reach out, please reach out to North Church. We will connect you with Terry and Melissa. And if you want to support financially, you want to be able to pray for them and stay in contact, let us know. We'll make sure that you get contact information so that you can receive the weekly email that goes out from Melissa to keep you informed on what God is doing in their lives and in the Middle East. And so I'm so glad that you joined us today, and I'm glad that all of you joined us, whether you're watching or listening to this podcast, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on Up and to the Right.